shall ever be. You cannot condemn me. I am punished enough. How dare you presume to understand what I have done, and what sacrifices I have made, and what I now must suffer? You will never know the depths of my pain, for which I am grateful.
This is going to be the first in a series on the mistakes of the Emperor.
Face your heresy!
When someone first hears those words, the first thought is, and should be,
You inspire your men to study such foul smut, Commissar? You heretic!
Indeed, in the 41st and 42nd millennium, the concept that the Emperor could have made a mistake easily qualifies as heretical in nature. In fact, during the height of the Great Crusade, the concept that the Emperor could have made a mistake was considered boorish and rude to the extreme to speak aloud. It was only during the late Crusade and onwards into the Horus Heresy that people began to question the decisions of the Emperor. Indeed, several of the Emperor's decisions are questionable at best and damning at worst. This was going to be a dive into what I first thought was going to be a condition of stupidity by need in a plot.
I don't know.
As with most things in 40k, once you start looking at the lore, things begin to catch your eye. Just as someone who is new to the lore would look at the Chaos Gods and assume them to be malevolent presences who only seek to conquer worlds, I saw the decisions of the Emperor as foolish in many regards. But just as with the Chaos Gods, when you start to really contemplate the nature of the subject in question, you realize there is a completely different level to the assumptions you have made. I had written a script for this very lore video and recorded it, and then halfway through the editing process, when I was trying to fit things together, I became frustrated with the amount of time it was taking to get a simple transition nailed down. I lost patience with what I was doing, and then made a quick decision that seemed to patch the entire problem. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it would do for the time being. As I prepared to compile the video, as with many that I do, I gave it a second look to make sure that it was ready. For some reason, the entirety of my editing was thrown off by a full half-second in some location, and disgusted I prepared to close the program. That's when the idea struck me, that in the middle of my rush to complete a simple video, I had made an easily avoidable and fundamental error that had cost me, and the only way to salvage it would be to completely start over or spend hours going through and fixing every single error in timing and placement, resetting clipped audio files and images. But even if I did that, my end product would not be as I intended. When looking at the mistakes the Emperor made in the course of the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade itself, we tend to look at them individually, outside the constraints of time, and seeing just the decision itself as a standalone event, leaving out all the exterior elements that led to that decision. After scrapping the old video and beginning a new one, this one, I have come to a different conclusion.
My head is heresy! Loathe the hairless head, for it is impure!
No.
The Emperor did not make terrible choices out of incompetence nor stupidity. He did not make the interpersonal choices out of malice or hate. In the 41st and 42nd millennium, the Emperor is worshipped as the true god of mankind, but in the 31st millennium he was known as just a man, and just like any man he fell victim to a sin we have all experienced and suffered because of: impatience. I feel your eyebrow raising in question as you listen to this, and your good commissar has not lost his mind nor his reasoning. When you look at the errors the Emperor made without context, it is easy to chalk up the decisions made to either plot convenience or pure contrivance. This is not a reader or a fan making excuses for bad writing. This series is no longer going to be about how a plot hole needed to be filled so the Emperor did something seemingly out of character. This is going to be an in-depth look at the very nature of the Emperor himself. A figure who is so far beyond even those who are closest to him in power and intellect that even to them he is godlike. We don't consider the actual nature of the man himself. The first Voxcast in this series was going to be into the decision of the Emperor to keep the full extent of the Webway project from his sons, a decision that ultimately led to the Chaos Gods being able to exploit Horus's doubts of the Emperor and turn on him. There are several decisions like this that had absolutely catastrophic results. His treatment of Angron upon first meeting him, his failure to cure Conrad Kurz of the warp-induced mental trauma that slowly drove him insane. Decisions like this, as well as others, seem ill-advised, ill-conceived, and directly led to the fall of the legions of these Primarchs to the power of chaos. But with all of that being said, we have to consider the nature of the one who made those mistakes. In the 42nd millennium, it is considered heretical to even contemplate that the God Emperor could have made an error, and with those errors being so apparent, how could he have come to be worshipped as a god? Even today we have deities that have made errors. It is not uncommon for those who are deified to have made mistakes in any pantheon in any mythology. Every single deity has made critical and profound mistakes that could have easily been rectified if not for one simple common theme. The said deity having a difficult, if not impossible time being able to relate to the interests, temptations, and desires of the common person. I now hear you thinking, the Emperor was a man. How is it that he couldn't relate to us? Well, I can't understand how some of you like the Stringstorm Idol project. How in the absolute pure living fuck can some of you guys actually stand this heretical garbage? That fucking Tao with a string bikini on sitting there singing songs into your face and you think it's cute. What the fuck?
Commissar, don't be difficult. You need your blood pressure medication.
I do not need fucking blood pressure medication. I need to start fucking killing Tao. What part of that don't you...
There, all calm now.
I would like to thank the Sisters Hospitaller for sending one of their finest medications to me. It is much appreciated to have somebody standing nearby me to make sure that I don't do anything rash or unreasonable like exterminating worlds for what the Inquisition is calling little to no reason whatsoever. Which is hilarious, because the Inquisition telling people that they blow up worlds for little to no reason whatsoever would be like Angron telling Corvus Corax that he has anger issues. Back to the core of the Voxcast. To understand the nature of the Emperor, one needs to look at the decisions made in the appropriate context, so we will look at the history of the Emperor as we currently know it. Regardless of how he came into being, the Emperor was born in modern-day Anatolia, sometime before the rise of the first cities in a Neolithic village that rested on the coast of the Sakarya River. He was a potent psyker, even at an extremely young age, and before he even reached puberty he already could use his mental abilities to a lethal effect. During his adolescence, while attending to his dead father, the Emperor envisioned his uncle having committed the murder. Without a second of anger or sadness about what he was about to do, the Emperor killed his uncle, using his mental abilities to stop the man's heart. According to the Emperor himself, this was when he realized that humanity needed to be stewarded to reach its full potential. It is likely he then left the village for what is known to him as the first city of humanity, which most likely was a Sumerian city-state. The Emperor has been alive since then, watching from the shadows and attempting to guide humanity without directly stepping forward. He is a being known as a Perpetual. If you are unaware of what a Perpetual is, it is a human who, through either natural or artificial means, is immortal. Some known Perpetuals are John Grammaticus, Olivia Surica, Erda, and Vulcan. In some cases, Perpetuals can come back from the dead. For an example of how severe a death a Perpetual can go through, one only has to look at Vulcan. At the Isstvan V Dropsite Massacre, Vulcan was captured by none other than Conrad Kurz of the 8th Legion.
Hell no, to the no, 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 hell to the no.
To give context to those who may be new to the lore, from a universe that is defined by how horrible things are, being captured by Conrad Kurz ranks easily in the top 10 worst fates imaginable. Vulcan was completely unaware of his status as a Perpetual until this moment, and it is only when Conrad loses his temper we found out exactly how extreme this ability to revive is. Vulcan had been directly hit by a low-level nuclear strike on Isstvan. Conrad had captured him afterwards. Conrad had stabbed him to death. Shot him. Tore out his heart. Cut off his head. Crushed him. Minced him. Exposed him to the vacuum of space and hooked him up to the exhaust ports of a battle barge. And yet Vulcan still kept coming back to life. In escaping Conrad Curse, Vulcan had activated a teleportation device which deposited him in high orbit of Macragge, homeworld of the Ultramarines. Vulcan drifted through the vacuum of space, entered the atmosphere, came through the fires of re-entry, and made a sizable crater in the city of Macragge Civitas.
Vulcan is dead! Or gone!
Still he lived. That shows two things. Some Perpetuals are able to come back from almost anything, and Vulcan's powers are absolutely insane.
Vulcan, step away from the frog.
I would like to pet this creature.
Don't do
It would be but a single poop on its noggin.
Do not boop that merry suicide bomber.
I want to poop the snoot.
Stop wanting.
But
Stop!
must.
Vulcan!
But poop.
No booping!
As I stated before, my original idea was that the Emperor was simply the victim of the writers needing to fill a plot hole, but that opinion has changed. I threw out my previous thoughts and looked at the lore surrounding his early life as well as the information we have throughout the lore. The earliest example of this is a Perpetual known as Erda. Her name translates to Earth in Old High German. Real subtle there, Games Workshop. She claims she met the Emperor when he was known as Neoth. Neoth. It is unclear if she is actually older than the Emperor himself, but what is known is she became personally involved with him.
And got busy!
But really though, what in the fuck do you mean?
In the book Saturnine, she gives the earliest timeline-wise indicator of what the Emperor would eventually become. It is often said of 40k lore that the timeline is so vast and records are so poor that even things that are accepted as fact could be no more than hearsay. Such is the case with our own recollections. In most cases, we are meant to see the Emperor as a loving and compassionate figure who cared deeply for mankind in all ways. As more of the Horus Heresy series has come out, and more of the Emperor's closest advisors have been introduced, we see a much different, and from my own perspective, much more believable personality. When she speaks of the Emperor, it's clear that even though they were both Perpetuals, she did not view herself as an equal to him. In fact, the way she spoke, she was nothing more than a candle next to a bonfire in comparison with him in intellect and drive, and her opinion of herself was high. What we gain from this insight is even among natural-born Perpetuals like him, the Emperor was overwhelmingly powerful. The more she speaks, the more of an insight into the Emperor's personality we gain. Throughout their time together, other Perpetuals would join them for a time but eventually leave, almost always because of the Emperor's vision simply driving over them, and being unable to deal with the arrogance he displayed and the risks he took to advance humanity.
Do I have a theory? Yes. The theory is the Emperor of Mankind, in fact, a giant asshole?
She claims it was the other Perpetuals leaving that caused the Emperor to begin on the Primarch project, an attempt to create loyal yet artificial immortals which would advance the Emperor's goals. Near the end of the Unification Wars, the Emperor had driven most of the Perpetuals who had accompanied him away. Only those whose views aligned with his own stayed. Erda claims that her genetic code was used alongside the Emperor's to form the Primarchs. Don't tell Forgrim about that because... oh god, just please don't, it's grimdark enough in here. What is known is that directly prior to the events of the Great Crusade, Erda left the Emperor, claiming that during the gestation of the Primarchs, the Emperor did not allow her to take any part in their lives. Claiming that she feared for the Primarchs because she knew what the Emperor was going to use them for, she lowered the defenses of the gestation area to the powers of the warp, allowing the Chaos Gods to pull them into a warp rift and disperse the Primarchs around the galaxy. Okay, this is supposed to be a video on the mistakes of the Emperor, but holy shit, woman. You were worried about how your man was going to take your kids and turn them into military-minded campaigners to take back the galaxy in the name of humanity, and your solution to this was to just throw open the car door while you're going 80 miles an hour and kick them out? This has to go down as the worst outcome from a child in the history of divorces. Envision yourself as a kid and your dad wants to send you to military boarding school, but one night your mom takes you out of your bed and straps your ass to a rocket and flings you into space. You crash landed in Gotham City on steroids and the only thing to eat is homeless people. Your name is Conrad Curse, and this is why you have issues.
I'd like to thank my mother.
Thank my mom. Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Mama.
Mamá, esto es para ti.
My mother, I love you.
I love you, Mom.
Fuck you, bitch.
Erda painted a picture of a man whose towering intellect had made him inflexible, aloof, and unwilling to see another person's point of view. This is not the first time in the lore we get the image of the man who is the Emperor, but it is the second most direct in its impact. The first all but confirms my beliefs. It was upon reading this that I was convinced. The living Emperor had been an artful being, as skilled at hiding his thoughts as he was reading those of others. What remained of him was powerful beyond comprehension, but it lacked the subtlety he had whilst he walked among men. Speaking with the Emperor had been like conversing with a star. The Emperor's words burned him. What hurt most deeply was what went unsaid. The Emperor greeted Guilliman not as a father receives a son, but as a craftsman who rediscovers a favorite tool he had thought lost. He had behaved like a prisoner locked in an iron cage who was past a rasp. Guilliman had no illusions. He was not the man who had brought the rasp, he was the rasp. While the Emperor had walked abroad, he had cloaked his manipulations in love. He had let his Primarchs call him father. He had let them call themselves his sons. He had rarely spoken those words himself, Guilliman now realized, and when he had done so without sincerity. Buffeted by the full might of the Emperor's will unclothed in flesh, a cloak had been ripped from Guilliman's eyes. The Emperor had allowed them to love him, and to believe he loved them in return. He had not. His Primarchs were weapons, and that was all. Though his power was immense, perhaps greater than it had been before he ascended, the Emperor's humanity was all but gone. He could no longer mask his thoughts with a human face. The Emperor's light was blinding, all-encompassing, but finally, Guilliman had seen it as a whole. The being he thought of his father could hide nothing from him. The Emperor did not love his sons.
You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it!
There were things, Guilliman, all his brothers, were nothing but a means to an end. He understood. He knew what his father wanted to achieve and why. Facing things like Karamar brought it back home to him time and time again. Knowing what opposed mankind made him see the utility of lies. Guilliman honestly say he loved all the men who called himself his sons? He barely knew them, especially now, calls blasphemous hordes in particular. They too were a means to an end. He and his father had that in common. The mantle of rulership was weighty, and molded the man that bore it. I never wanted to be a tyrant, thought the Primarch. Perhaps my father did not wish to be so either. History has roles for us that cannot be denied. We are but pieces on the board of eternity. My lord, said Matteo into the Primarch's silence, please tell us, does the Emperor love us? We are so much more like you than you ever intended, thought Guilliman. You gave too much of yourself to us. Without realizing in your arrogance, you made yourself a father in truth. We are your sons in every way. Did you even see that? My lord, said Matteo. The Emperor loves us all, lied Guilliman.
I have to admit that you are kind of an asshole.
Oh.
So what are we left with? What is the true nature of the Emperor? It is a man so far removed from the base human, so intelligent and so powerful, that he was a god in everything but title when he walked. He is a figure completely obsessed with his goal, to ascend humanity, and convinced of his own forthrightness of thought. He had few friends, few real friends, and even fewer still that saw him for as he truly was. The one thing he definitively was not was a loving father and understanding ruler. He was a man who simply saw no other way and could not be convinced that there might be. In the end, the greatest fault of the Emperor was an abject lack of humility in the face of issues where a bit of it would have made all the difference. He viewed his Primarchs, and all other humans in fact, as a means to an end, not as true sons and subjects, but as tools. Now place the Emperor in that context and revisit the decisions made. Think of the decisions made and consider the nature of the man who made them. The decision to hide the truth about the warp, telling a convenient lie, not to have to explain a complex truth. The decision to allow Lorgar to continue to worship him, only stepping in when the Word-Bearer's Legion moved too slowly to ignore. The handling of Angron and the Emperor's lack of compassion and empathy toward his 17th son. This is not the decision-making process of an idiot or the simple need to fill a plot hole. These mistakes are all a part of the character makeup of the Emperor himself, and while he most definitively had the patience to make plans that lasted several thousand years to come to fruition, he had very little indeed when it came to dealing with interruptions to those plans or even the explanation of them to others. He did not want discussion. He did not want input. He wanted results and nothing else, and as long as those results are satisfactory, the ends completely justified the means. His arrogance in the face of this broke no debate, and the only times he ever truly debated, he did so only to pass the time. In this series, I will look at the Emperor's choices through this light, with this understanding of him. The nature of the Emperor dictated his own fall, and every decision was well within character. He sought to build an imperium that would be laid out to very exacting specifications, a house for humanity, if you will, and using the tools he himself made, he intended to build that house. I have been in construction myself for a decent portion of my adult life, and there's a very simple comparison to make. When I build a house, I don't negotiate with the hammer.
What would you know of struggle, perfect son, huh? When have you fought against the mutilation of your mind? Which one of us had to rise up against a kingdom with nothing but a horde of starving slaves? Listen to your blue-clad wretches yelling of courage and honor. Courage and honor! Courage and honor! Do you even know the meaning of those words? Courage is fighting the kingdom that enslaves you, no matter that their armies overshadow yours by 10,000 to 1. You know nothing of courage. Honor is resisting a tyrant when all others suckle and grow fat on the hypocrisy he feeds them. You know nothing of honor.